Sup guys? I saw a few long comments on my data mine breakdown of the new HMS event, of just other people sharing their thoughts. There are some that I would like to respond to, but instead of writing replies to each one, I felt that there was enough substance to make a video out of it, particularly in cases where there were factual inaccuracies, and I think people need to know, because they might not check back on the video to see the replies after already having watched the video. Some people might not feel comfortable having their comments being put in the spotlight like I'm about to do, and others might like it, but I think if you write a comment for everyone to see, then it's fair game. Of course, the opinions I express, including the ones in this video, are fair game for criticism as well. But if you're gonna come for the crown, then you better... With that being said, I'm not going to be bashing anyone, but just addressing the points and keeping it cordial. Sometimes it might be hard to tell if I write a comment in a matter-of-fact kind of tone, but hopefully you can tell from my delivery here that I'm obviously super offended and angry that people dare to have their opinions independent of mine. Alright, here's the first one. It's long and I won't read the whole thing, but I'll highlight the parts where points are brought up and respond to them one by one. Oh, and also, despite the title of the video, not everything that I respond to will be factual misinformation. For example, this comment says that they don't know why Trafalgar was made to be just an overall weaker Z52. This is not necessarily a factual error, but I just want to say, even if she's worse than Z52, what's wrong with that? Z52 is pretty much the best Vanguard ship in the game. How is it a surprise that not every new ship that comes out is better than every single one before it? This has been a regular occurrence for years. Even if a Vanguard came out that was better than Hindenburg, and better than Plymouth, and better than Unzen, they could still be worse than Z52, and that's not really an issue. Not only that, but the other UR ship that came out in this event, Lion, seems to be better than all the other battleships. It's probably the strongest pair of UR ships we've gotten so far from an event. Further into the comment, there are comparisons to other UR ships to highlight that she is too support-focused. I don't think comparing Trafalgar to ships like Bismarck's Way or Shinano is very helpful. Let's instead take a look at the other UR destroyers. 2 out of 3 of them, Lafitte and Mogador, are entirely dependent on their support to be useful, and neither of them are HMS. Lafitte probably doesn't need an explanation, but Mogador, without her stab rooting the enemy in place briefly and increasing torpedo damage taken, would just be a decent stat stick outdamaged by SSR destroyers like the DDGs. Then they complain about some minor parts of her kit, which I do agree with, for example that the max limit break perk she has is confusing, but not to the extent that it negatively impacts her overall strength. Next, it says that she must use a fast gun because she has 125% main gun efficiency with low firepower. A couple issues with this. First is that she has 140% efficiency when you factor in her third skill. The second is that you can't just look at the main gun stats alone to determine whether to use a pea shooter or a normal gun on a ship. It's specifically the ratio of main gun damage to on-fire barrage damage that determines what gun they should bring. For example, let's take a look at Shiranui, who almost doesn't have a main gun. You would still bring a normal gun on her because a fast gun would do even less, since her barrage is even weaker than her main gun mount. On the other hand, on Z52's release, I saw people claim that you would definitely not want to use the pea shooter on her because she has 170% main gun efficiency, which means it's too high to sacrifice her main gun slot to trigger her barrage more often. This turned out to be extremely wrong because, regardless of how strong her gun is, her barrage is just that much stronger. I hope you can see my point in these examples. Again, just like in the data mine breakdown, I suspect that she will still want to use a pea shooter gun, but I just think that it's misleading to point out her main gun specs alone without any mention of how it compares to her potential barrage DPS when discussing what her gun choice should be. Next, the comment mentions that she has an identity crisis where she wants to be paired up with battleships, but debuffs anti-air. I also disagree with this. Identity crisis is Mogador, who deals almost entirely gun damage, and deals about half as much damage against heavy armor compared to light armor, yet she has a debuff for torpedo damage. For Trafalgar, I didn't even take her 2% AA debuff into consideration because its effect is so minor. Likewise for the 15% slow. Maybe if this was 5 years ago and we didn't have a ton of options to literally root the enemy, a 15% slow might have been a bit more useful. Ignoring the 2 debuffs from her first skill does not change my evaluation of her potential at all. Next, she does not need to be paired with battleships specifically, and I want to point out the plural here. She only needs to be paired up with 1 battleship, or any ship with an arcing main gun attack, including Kearsarge, which I just assume it wasn't explicitly stated at the time in the data mine, but it is now updated on the wiki. Many of the best and most frequently used compositions these days feature a combination of battleships and carriers. There's no good reason to consider a ship's potential only in a 3 carrier or 3 battleship fleet. And in mixed fleets, Trafalgar benefits everyone with her evasion rate debuff. Finally, there are other ships that her buffs will benefit, namely Unicorn, Scylla, Cheshire, and Ark Royal for players who haven't gotten Implacable. And it will also age gracefully into the future as they will surely continue to add powerful HMS ships, not only via events, but potentially research as well as Monarch's Augment, which has yet to come out. When you compare her cross-fleet buff to that of many other URs, it is not only much more powerful, but also future-proof. I just don't think that Trafalgar is the ship you should choose as an example to complain about underpowered ultra-rare ships. Alright, moving on. This comment says that she feels a slot no longer needed if you've cleared Chapter 15, which I disagree with. Aside from campaign, which she will obviously excel in with her anti-air and anti-submarine capabilities, she will excel in countering ship types that Aurora's debuffs are not applicable to. The first reply here is partially correct, as Trafalgar is pretty much a strict upgrade over Bristol and Helena meta, but there's a little bit more nuance when talking about Aurora. Depending on the enemy's evasion numbers, it could be a good idea to use them together, as there's no indication that their effects don't stack. Even if you don't have space for both of them though, against the 2 hull classes that Aurora works against, if you can keep her alive without sacrificing much of anything else in your team building, she will still contribute more with her more powerful debuff. With that being said, the second half of the comment is misinformed. I'm assuming by the fact that destroyers and light cruisers in our docks typically have the highest evasion stat out of all classes, but this trend isn't really found in enemies. We can take a look at the stats of some of the recent meta bosses, with the most recent light armor bosses being Jinsu and Wichita meta. Jinsu has 75 evasion and 40 luck, and Wichita has 75 evasion and 50 luck, and Wichita in particular has no additional evasion buffs. On a side note, Wichita is a heavy cruiser, so unfortunately Aurora's debuff actually wouldn't work on her. Then we can look at Taiho meta, for example, the heavy armor carrier, who also has 75 evasion and 50 luck, which is higher than that of Jinsu and tied with Wichita. Hornet meta, who is a medium armor carrier, also has the same evasion and luck, but also has a buff that increases their evasion rate further. Therefore, Trafalgar's evasion rate debuff would actually be less effective on a light armor cruiser like Jinsu than a heavier armor enemies like Taiho and Hornet. Add to the fact that against these heavier armor enemies, Aurora can't be used at all, it makes her the most valuable against said enemies. Then a second reply something about her 15% slow, which I already mentioned I don't put a whole lot of stock into. The final reply here says that there's no way to know if Trafalgar is really that good yet, as no one has her fully raised. While I think this could be said for her damage, her debuff has guaranteed activation, doesn't have any kind of weird timing or restrictions, and the value of evasion rate debuffs are not difficult to calculate. I did it in this video with Aurora's debuff, and all you have to do is the same calculation but replace the 98 with an 88, which results in an increase of almost 13% with the given stats used in that calculation. This is about as strong as the air raid assault buff, but also works for all your other ships including battleships, so we can definitely start to quantify her strength without having used her. And then I just thought this was funny because in this comment, they said that Trafalgar is mediocre because she's only good in campaign. And then here she says Raffaello, who is only good in campaign, is really good. Okay, there was also a long comment about how Santa Fe is better than Trafalgar that I wanted to respond to, but I don't see it anymore, so I'll just assume they read her skill again and deleted the post. But yeah, I hope this was informative. I used the comments as a jumping off point to hopefully clear up some of the misconceptions that maybe lurking viewers might have had from reading them. Once again, feel free to share your thoughts if you want. Let me know if I got anything factually wrong. And of course, my opinions are open for criticism. I can handle it if the criticisms are right, and I can handle it even more if they're wrong. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.